The locked room that bleeds at night. The blood appeared at exactly 3:47 every morning. Fresh, wet, impossible. Sarah Henderson stood in the hallway of her new home, coffee mug trembling in her hand as she stared at the crimson streaks running down the pristine white wall. She had scrubbed this exact spot clean just 12 hours ago. The paint underneath was new. The wall was solid. There was no logical explanation for what she was seeing. But there it was. Again. 3 days earlier, the Hendersons had signed the papers on the Victorian house at the end of Maple Street. The price had been remarkable, almost 70% below market value. Their realtor, a nervous woman named Patricia, had rushed through the walk-through, her eyes darting to the second floor as if something waited there. She handed over the keys with shaking hands and left before they could ask questions. Michael Henderson had laughed it off. Old houses made people superstitious, he said. They were getting the deal of a lifetime. Now, standing in the hallway with blood dripping onto the hardwood floor, Sarah wondered what they had actually bought. She set down her coffee and touched the stain. It was warm. The consistency was unmistakable. This was not paint. This was not rust. This was blood. Michael came downstairs, drawn by his wife's sharp intake of breath. He was a practical man, an engineer who believed in facts and evidence. But even he could not explain away what covered their wall. They searched the entire house, every room, every closet, every corner of the attic and basement. They found nothing, no source, no injured animal, no leak from above. The house was completely secure, every door and window locked from the inside, exactly as they had left them the night before. Michael grabbed cleaning supplies and attacked the stain with the desperation of a man trying to scrub away his growing fear. The blood came off easily, too easily, leaving the white paint underneath unblemished. By noon, the wall looked perfect again. That night, neither of them slept well. Sarah lay awake, listening to the old house settle around them. Every creak sounded like footsteps. Every gust of wind against the windows sounded like whispering. At 3:47, she heard something. A wet sliding sound, like something being dragged across a surface. She shook Michael awake, and they crept downstairs together. Michael holding a baseball bat he had unpacked specifically for this purpose. The hallway was empty, silent. But the blood was there. Not just one stain this time. 3 of them. One on the wall where the first had appeared, one on the opposite wall, and one on the ceiling, directly above their heads, defying gravity as it pooled and dripped. Michael dropped the bat. His hands were shaking. Sarah backed away slowly, her mind racing through impossible explanations. They spent the rest of the night in their car, parked in the driveway, waiting for sunrise. When the sun finally came up, they went back inside. The blood remained, now dried and dark, but still fresh enough to smell. Michael called a contractor, then a plumber, then a home inspector. 3 different professionals walked through their house, examined the walls, checked the pipes and the roof and the attic. They found nothing wrong. The house was structurally sound. There were no leaks, no rust, no water damage that could explain the stains. The contractor, an older man named Bill who had worked on houses in the neighborhood for 40 years, pulled Michael aside before leaving. His voice was low, almost apologetic. He knew this house. Everyone in town knew this house. It had been empty for 3 years before the Hendersons bought it. The previous owners, the Whitakers, had left in the middle of the night. Before them, 2 other families had lasted less than 6 months each. Michael pressed for details, but Bill shook his head. He did not deal in ghost stories, he said. He dealt in wood and nails and concrete. But if Michael wanted his advice, he would sell the house and leave. Soon, Michael did not tell Sarah about this conversation. Instead, he bought cameras. Professional security cameras with night vision and motion detection. He installed them in every hallway, pointed at every wall where the blood had appeared. If something was happening in this house, he would catch it on video. There had to be a rational explanation. That night, they watched the camera feeds on Michael's laptop. They sat together on the couch, eyes fixed on the screen, waiting. At 3:46, nothing appeared unusual. The hallways were empty. The walls were clean. Then, at exactly 3:47, the timestamp flickered for just a fraction of a second. When it steadied, blood covered the walls. Not gradually, not slowly. It was simply there, as if it had always existed and reality had just caught up. Sarah rewound the footage, played it again and again. The result was the same. One frame showed clean walls, the next frame showed blood. There was no in-between, no explanation, no source. Michael stared at the screen, his engineering mind struggling to process what he was seeing. Reality did not work this way. Effects had causes. Substances did not materialize from nothing. But the blood did. Over the next week, the phenomenon intensified. The blood appeared earlier each night. First at 3:47, then 3:30, then 3:15. The stains grew larger, spreading across more walls, creeping down the hallway toward the bedrooms. Sarah stopped sleeping entirely. She would lie awake, watching the clock, dreading the moment when she would hear that wet, sliding sound. Michael tried to maintain his skepticism, but even he could not deny what was happening in their home. On the 8th night, the blood formed shapes, not random streaks and drips, but deliberate patterns. Handprints appeared on the walls, sliding downward as if someone invisible was dragging themselves along, trying to stay upright. The prints were small, child-sized. Sarah felt ice flood her veins. She grabbed Michael's arm and pointed, unable to speak. The handprints continued down the hallway, one after another, leaving a trail toward the stairs. Then up the stairs, then along the second-floor hallway, always moving toward the same destination. The locked room at the end of the hall. This room had been locked when they moved in. Patricia, the realtor, had said the key was lost, but they could have a locksmith open it if they wanted. It was just an old storage room, she said. Nothing important. But the Hendersons had not bothered. They had plenty of space without it. The locked door remained closed, ignored, forgotten. Until now. Michael and Sarah stood in front of that door, watching bloody handprints appear on its surface, each one layered over the last. The message was clear. Something wanted them to open this door. Something wanted them to see what was inside. Michael retrieved a crowbar from the garage. His hands were steady as he wedged it into the doorframe, but Sarah could see the tension in his jaw, the fear he was trying to hide. With a sharp crack, the lock broke and the door swung open. The room was empty, completely empty. No furniture, no boxes, no storage of any kind. Just bare walls, bare floor, and a single window. The window was painted shut. Layers of old paint sealed it closed, suggesting it had not been opened in decades. But as they stood there, a cold breeze moved through the room, lifting Sarah's hair, carrying with it the faint smell of flowers, funeral flowers. Michael walked to the window and tried to open it. The paint did not crack. The window did not budge. It was sealed completely. Yet the breeze continued, impossible and undeniable. Sarah noticed something on the floor near the window. Scratches in the hardwood, deep gouges that formed letters. She knelt down, tracing them with her finger. "Help me." The words were carved with something sharp, with desperate force. Sarah looked up at Michael, and in his eyes she saw her own fear reflected back. They left the room. Michael pulled the broken door shut, and they went downstairs without speaking. That night, they did not try to sleep. They sat in the living room, lights on, waiting for dawn. At 3:15, they heard it. Not the wet, sliding sound they had grown accustomed to. This was different. This was scratching. Fingernails against wood. Coming from inside the walls, moving through the house like something trapped was trying to claw its way out. The sound moved closer, down from the second floor, along the first floor walls, surrounding them. Sarah covered her ears, but she could still hear it. Michael stood up, fists clenched, as if he could fight whatever was making that sound. Then it stopped. Complete silence. The kind of silence that feels too heavy, too thick. Blood began seeping under the door of the locked room. Not dripping down the stairs, flowing. A steady stream that ran along the second-floor hallway found the stairs and poured down like a waterfall. More blood than any human body could contain, more blood than made any physical sense. It pooled at the bottom of the stairs, spreading across the floor toward where they stood. Sarah and Michael backed away. But the blood followed, creeping forward with impossible intention. Michael grabbed Sarah's hand and pulled her toward the front door. They ran outside into the cold night air, not stopping until they reached their car. Through the windows of the house, they could see blood covering the glass from the inside, blocking their view, sealing the house in red. They drove to a hotel and did not return until morning. When the sun was up, when the world felt normal again, they forced themselves to go back. The house was clean, every wall was white, every floor was spotless. There was no blood anywhere, no evidence of what they had witnessed. If not for the broken lock on the upstairs door, they might have convinced themselves they had imagined it all. But they had not imagined it. They both knew what they had seen. Sarah spent the day researching the house. She went to the library, searched old newspapers, talked to longtime residents who remembered when the house was built. The story she uncovered made her blood run cold. 23 years ago, the Whitaker family had lived in this house. Thomas and Linda Whitaker and their 9-year-old daughter Emily. Emily was a quiet child, artistic and imaginative. She spent hours in her room, the room at the end of the hall, drawing and writing stories. One October morning, Linda found Emily dead beneath her bedroom window. The window was open. Emily had fallen, or so the police concluded. An accident, a tragedy. The window was on the second floor, high enough that the fall killed her instantly. The case was closed. Accidental death. The Whitakers moved away and never returned. The house sat empty for a year before another family bought it. That family lasted 3 months before leaving without explanation. The next family lasted even less time. But there was more to the story. Sarah found it in old police reports that had been digitized and stored online. An officer had noted something unusual at the scene. Emily's fingernails were broken and bloody. The windowsill was scratched, deep gouges in the wood. The window itself was difficult to open, requiring significant force. For a 9-year-old girl to open it would have been nearly impossible. And there was another detail. Emily had a bruise on her shoulder shaped like a handprint. An adult handprint. The case was never reopened. The Whitakers insisted it was an accident. No charges were ever filed. The truth, whatever it was, died with Emily. Sarah showed Michael what she had found. They sat together in the hotel room, the weight of the revelation settling over them. Emily had not fallen. She had been pushed, and she had tried to stop it. She had clawed at the windowsill, trying to hold on. But someone had pushed her anyway. The blood was her blood. The handprints on the walls were her handprints. The scratching in the walls was her trying to be heard. For 23 years, she had been trying to tell someone what really happened. That night, the Hendersons returned to the house. Not to live there. To finish what Emily had started. They went directly to the locked room. Michael had brought tools. Sarah had brought a camera. They were going to document everything. They were going to find proof. They were going to give Emily what she had been denied for over 2 decades. Justice. The room was as empty as before. But now they looked more carefully. They examined every inch of the walls. They pulled up the floorboards near the window. And there, hidden beneath the floor, they found it. A journal, small and worn, the pages yellowed with age. Emily's journal. Sarah opened it with shaking hands. The entries were written in a child's careful handwriting. Stories about school, drawings of flowers and animals, normal things. Until the last few pages. The final entries were different. Desperate, frightened. Emily wrote about her father's anger, his drinking, his violence. She wrote about hiding in her room, about the lock that did not work, about being scared to sleep at night. The last entry was dated the day before she died. 3 sentences, written in increasingly shaky handwriting. He is coming. He is going to hurt me. Someone please help. Sarah closed the journal, tears streaming down her face. Michael stood at the window, his jaw tight with rage at a man who had been dead for years, but whose crime still echoed in this house. They heard it then, a soft sound behind them. They turned and saw her Emily stood in the doorway. Not solid, but not quite transparent either. She looked exactly as she did in the photos Sarah had found at the library. 9 years old, dark hair, wide, frightened eyes, and blood on her dress. Sarah's breath caught, but she did not scream. She understood now. This was not a haunting. This was a plea for help that had gone unanswered for far too long. Emily looked at Sarah, then at the journal in her hands. She nodded once, slowly. Then she pointed at the window. Michael understood. He took his tools and began removing the window entirely. Sarah used her camera to photograph every page of the journal, every scratch on the floor, every detail that could serve as evidence. They worked through the night. When morning came, they had everything they needed. They took the journal to the police. They showed them the photos. They demanded the case be reopened. The officer who took their report was skeptical at first. 23 years was a long time. Thomas Whitaker was dead. Linda Whitaker had moved to another state. What could be accomplished now? But Sarah insisted. She told them about the blood, about the handprints, about Emily's desperate attempts to be heard. She did not care if they believed in ghosts. She cared that they believed Emily. The case was reopened. Investigators reviewed the original reports. They interviewed Linda Whitaker, who finally broke down and confessed what she had known, but had been too afraid to say. Thomas had killed Emily. He had pushed her from that window in a drunken rage because she had spilled paint on his favorite chair. Linda had helped cover it up, terrified of what would happen if she told the truth. The truth came out. Too late to prosecute, too late to save Emily, but not too late to give her what she needed most: to be believed. The Hendersons returned to the house one last time. They went to the locked room, now missing its window, open to the air and sunlight. They sat on the floor where Emily had spent her final hours, and they spoke to her. They told her the truth was known. They told her she had been heard. They told her she could rest now. That night, at 3:15, they waited. But the blood did not come. The scratching did not come. The house was silent. Emily was gone. Finally, peacefully gone. The Hendersons sold the house the following week. A family with 2 young daughters bought it, drawn by the beautiful Victorian architecture and the newly renovated second-floor room with a large, open window. They never experienced anything unusual. The house welcomed them with warmth and light. Because some spirits do not haunt out of malice. They haunt because they have something to say. And sometimes, all they need is someone brave enough to listen. If this story kept you up at night, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss our next terrifying tale. Drop a comment below and tell us, have you ever experienced something you could not explain? Share your story with our community. And if you enjoyed this video, check out our playlist of true paranormal encounters. Until next time, sleep well, if you can.